Allow me? Inquired Paulus in heated defiance. Third of all, I would like to point out the gross hypocrisy of your argument. In olden days, patricians exploited and brutalized the plebeians, and now we are all equal, and so much the better for it. Citizenship to Rome used to be only for those residents of this very city-state, but when it was widened to include all of Italy, the new citizens created some of the best soldiers and philosophers in our history. But from the beginning, Rome was founded on the murder of the Sabine men and the rape of the Sabine women, and as much has no claims to cultural superiority regarding sacred ground or treatment of womenfolk or any such other moral high ground. Those new members of our republic that you mentioned, began Paulus, shared our ways and our values, not like you northern barbarians. The Sabines were our rivals and were eventually assimilated into our culture. I honor their memory. Odoacer rolled his eyes, and several senators expressed outrage at the insensitivity of portraying Rome's past crimes in such a positive light. Such intolerance, said Odoacer. What are you afraid of, Paulus? Can't you see that we're all equal? That a Romano-Goth is just as good as any other Roman? What am I afraid of, you ask? He looked around at the marble floors of the Senate. I am afraid that your double-tongued lies and jargon are only self-serving nonsense created in order to blind us Romans from your true motives, which are to rob us of our inherited traditions and our liberties. I am afraid that you and your kin will trample down our frontiers and hold us in derision and slavery, thus retarding civilization for the next 1,000 years. The senators all shrugged and sunk lower into their seats as the Gothic chieftains glared around in indignation and moral outrage. Your arguments are absurd, Paulus, said Odoacer. I assume you must be suffering from some unresolved neurotic issues with your father, whom you probably wish to kill in order to ravage your own mother. Several senators raised their eyebrows at this accusation. We are an oppressed minority, we Romano-Goths, continued Odoacer. Julius Caesar, the bloodthirsty pig, killed and oppressed our ancestors and then took our land. Don't you want to atone for the sins of your fathers, Paulus? Aren't we all brothers? Aren't my people all deserving of citizenship given the past sins of Rome? Your attack on my sanity is irrational and has no counterpart in the natural order of the world. Your contempt for our leaders is brazen, revealing your disdain for our culture. And furthermore, I do not believe in collective guilt, but I will add that if I had been Caesar, I would have done the same as he, to the greater glory of Rome. The Senate gasped for air. A few supported Paulus, but were too afraid to speak up, not out of fear of the Gothic chieftains, who were few in number, but in fear of the countless guilt-ridden senators that fell sway to the arguments of Odoacer. There you have it, gentlemen, said Odoacer with his hands in the air, gesturing in triumph. My opponent has betrayed his true self. He shows no remorse for the sins of his ancestors. He prejudges my people, the Romano-Goths, and shows a tendency towards paranoia. He should seek a good Greek physician for his mental ailments and step down from the Senate, for he is obviously an insane person and wretched human being who condemns his fellow Romans, my people, the Romano-Goths. The Senate applauded Odoacer. All in favor of Senator Paulus abdicating his post? Cast your votes, he proclaimed, glaring around in all directions. There was a long deliberation as the votes were cast. All of a sudden, one of the senators ran towards the pillars of the veranda and looked out under the blazing sun. "Jupiter, save us!" he exclaimed, with eyes bulging out of their sockets. "The barbarians are coming!" The Colosseum seemed to take no notice of the screaming barbarian masses that poured into the city, unleashing torch and sword. The spectators continued on in their hypnotic gratification. The senators ran around in confusion, each exiting his own way, creating bottlenecks at every exit. The Gothic chieftains raised their swords and hollered in joy and triumph. "Praise Hannibal!" exclaimed Odoacer. Only Paulus remained in the center of the building. Being correct never felt so. He paused for a moment, looking at the breathtaking tapestries on the wall. Terrible. He ran towards the Colosseum in order so that he could grab as much wine and bread as he could before it was all gone. The whole notion that greed is good offends my sensibilities on many levels, particularly because of the fact that I am, to a great degree, very much in favor of markets and what they do. I'm definitely anti-socialist and anti-totalitarian within my heart and soul to 100% extent. But at the same time, if you look throughout history, you will find many states of civilization where there have been a leisured class that have been able to sit back and contemplate things. And you'll never have found any time and place in history when there was really such a consensus that greed is good. It's almost universally been condemned as a bad virtue that leads to negative consequences, and I don't think it's inherently a aspect that we should embrace. I'm going to analyze this to a little extent between some neoclassical, I'm going to use a few neoclassical models and jargon to analyze this concept that greed is good. So first of all, I'd like to say, if greed is good, what is the desired outcome? Ever since Aristotle, at least, it's been commonly, held within common discourse as obvious that people want to be happy. It's pretty simple when you think about it. People definitely want to be happy. I don't know many people that want to not be happy. I might know some people who want others to be unhappy, but I digress. Anyway, if greed is good and the object of a person's goals is happiness, then there would be a perfect horizontal line between happiness and profit. And it would go on and on and on until you reached, forever potentially. So by that logic, Bill Gates would be living in a state of constant, almost orgasmic pleasure. Now, I think most people know that money does not really buy happiness, but I would also say that I don't think that you can really be happy in a sheer state of poverty. All those people that, would say, oh, but, a Buddhist sat under the tree and got happiness, blah, 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 blah. Well, the Buddha was a rich prince. He could go back to his parents and get money anytime he wanted to and stop the Buddhist fad. So, that was a choice he made, and he had freedom, and he had security and comfort. But when you have children and you see them crying because they don't have food, I'm sorry, I just personally do not think you can be happy. And if you are happy, there's something wrong with you, and, you're not going to reproduce genes, and that gene is going to go extinct. But I digress again. So I would say that there is an inverse relationship, a converse relationship between money and happiness to an extent, and then it runs into diminishing returns. So I would say that, in my opinion, to some extent, at one point in time, the marginal utility of money starts to decrease when it comes into contact with leisure and spending time with families. So there's nothing particularly revolutionary about this idea. It seems pretty obvious to most people. Even in the Bible and Proverbs, it says that, don't try to be rich, don't try to be poor, be somewhere in between, and that's where you'll find your true happiness. So the question is there a universal spot of consumption where marginal utility decreases instead of increases? Well, I frankly don't know, but Gary Becker has some ideas on that. He's an interesting fella, a Nobel laureate from the University of Chicago, economics. So I would recommend this link if you are interested further in the subject. But, greed is not good, and I am firmly anti-socialist, and I believe that. But they should understand that the reason that they're getting favorable press right now is that by this point business regards them as its troops. Corporate executives don't really want apartheid in South Africa anymore. It's like the reason that business was willing to support the civil rights movement in the United States. American business has no use for Southern apartheid. In fact, it was bad for business. Capitalism is not fundamentally racist. It can exploit racism for its purposes, but racism isn't built into it. Capitalism basically wants people to be interchangeable cogs, and differences among them, such as on the basis of race, usually are not functional. I mean, they may be functional for a period, like if you want a super exploited workforce or something, but those situations are kind of anomalous. Over the long run, you can expect capitalism to be anti-racist, just because it's anti-human. And race is, in fact, a human characteristic. There's no reason why it should be a negative characteristic, but it's a human characteristic. So therefore, identifications based on race interfere with the basic ideal that people should be available just as consumers and producers, interchangeable cogs who will purchase all the junk that's produced. That's their ultimate function. And any other properties they might have are kind of irrelevant and usually a nuisance. Man is a tribal being. That much is for certain. This fact was thoroughly investigated by the late Sir Arthur Keith, disciple of Charles Darwin, who called it the dual code of enmity, and in today's social psychology it is called the in-group, out-group mentality. No man is an island. We are weak creatures, not bears, tigers, and lions that can survive all on our own.